Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Fake Accents Unite. The Britisher informs me that I might be sounding slightly different this evening. This is due to a new microphone. I promise I've not been taken ill. But speaking of the Britisher, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. Everything sounds a little lower this evening, what can I say?
Do I have a bass boost on? Is that what you're talking about? I don't have a bass boost on. I just have this different microphone, which apparently, also as I understand it, it is predicting my voice in a more accurate fashion. Although perhaps it's just that I'm smoking 50, 60 a day, clearly, and
all
this
this
is what
talk of your not being Ivan Rebrov is now clearly shown to be a pack of lies.
You know, given that you constantly refer to me as Ivan Rebrov, I probably should have a listen to some of his music at some point to understand what on earth you're talking about.
Indeed, you should listen to yourself singing, and once in a while perhaps try and find an interview of yourself in which you will find that you have a very, very low voice.
A very, very low voice. Since Gowan was jesting with me, he was like, "Oh, I'm putting a bet in that you'll be 22 seconds late," and other people talking about how late I should be, and he's just chimed in to say 114 seconds. He's beaten me this week, but next week I'm sure we'll be on time. I apologise to a great degree for the lateness of the stream. It won't happen again, obviously. Never been late before. Won't happen again. Absolutely. I can see the chat saying you've got Brian Blessed as a guest. Impressive. Chad NSO like that. No, bad. That fake accent.
Do us a favour, NSO.
Yeah.
Say, Gordon's alive!
Say what?
Oh dear God, he is not familiar with Flash Gordon.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. Goodness me. I'm trying too hard to be a deep thinker, apparently. This is what Satan sounds like. Goodness me. I didn't think that's that. Clean Your Lobster 1 saying, I've met NSO, this is absolutely his real voice. I hope so. I'm not actually trying to put something on, although now that you speak of it, I have to put on a little bit of a deep impression. You know the way it is.
You do realise that we will have to change the name of the stream now.
But to what now?
From Fake Accents Unite to Fake Voices Unite.
Fake voices, indeed. No, I don't know what you're talking about, British. We've well established in the fake accents law that the title of the stream has no basis in reality. So Gowan says...
you should be talking about bases with a voice like this.
Since Gowan says, no, you won't be on time. The day you are early, I'll praise Sweden for something they did right. Thank you, since Gowan. Always appreciate
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. I will try. The reason we're late today is last week the academic agent promised me that he would come on this week because it's been ages. And after all, I am turning up to his Wednesday show, the B show, as it were, for its 100th episode. Along with a colourful cast of characters that we usually are. So, I said, wouldn't it be nice if he came on fake accents? And lo and behold, he's just disappeared into the ether this evening. We can't see him there at all. Congratulations to British Knight. Thank you for becoming a member for 2 months in a row. Very much appreciated. And British Knight says, fake accents indeed, etc. Colin P. Smith says, are you admitting that Ray was correct about the genuineness of your accents? I disagree. I disagree entirely. I've never put on a fake accent in my entire life. Not even as a joke. Not even for the Ministry of Fake Accents.
If only to cover up your Russian accent, of course. Which of course would just be a fake Russian accent, given that you're German.
I'm German now. Okay, yes, of course. Yes, I'm following you now.
Ivan Rebrov was actually German.
Yes, and indeed...
It was an assumed character, the whole Ivan Rebrov thing.
You assume that I'm not merely a Swede putting on a fake German accent, because the two are quite similar, you know.
There is that, yes.
It's like, well, you know the Swedes, they just sound like gay German people, right? Have you heard of it? The Swedish people just sound like gay German people. Yeah,
there is some truth in that. Yes.
No, I'm not gay.
The joy of seeing Stephen Fry on QI looking for his handy.
Mein Handy. Yes.
Mein Handy. It just he basically just said yes. It's handy must be the gayest word for mobile phone that anybody has come up with, and that yes, you just can't help it. It just sounds so ridiculously camp.
Indeed.
And then obviously he can't help but perform it, and yes, it's quite a gem.
It's quite good. Yes. I can see Forks in the chat saying, I just wasted a minute and a half trying to see if I had YouTube on slow playback. Oh, I like that. I appreciate that. Even the Britisher sounds normal now. Apparently I just completely ruined it.
Oh yeah, then things must be extreme. So do enlighten us. So what was the microphone you had before, and what is the microphone which you have now?
I had a Trust GTX, a really cheap kind of... I mean, it came as part of a pack. I got it for Christmas a couple of years ago with a 720p webcam, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And then this one is my brother's moved on to a new microphone. He's passed me on his old one. And this one is a Fifine Technology something or other. In fact, I have the box here somewhere, but it doesn't give me any details because he doesn't have the original instructions with it. He just said, "Hope you can get some use out of that." So there we are.
So when you interviewed Peter Hitchens, name drop, were you using that old microphone?
Oh no, I had professional recording equipment from one of Sargon's editors that time.
You see, when you interviewed Peter Hitchens, you sounded like you did on the old microphone.
Nonsense. I don't know what
perhaps
lies.
the chat will be able to back me up here, because now you sound considerably different. And if you give out the details of your new microphone, I think it would sell quite a few. Just simply because everybody will say, "Oh, well, yes, I want to sound like Zeus too when I'm thundering on YouTube."
All right, fair enough. It is a Fifine USB K670 microphone. There you go. So you can take that to the bank. I'm not sure if you'll be able to cash it, but you'll be able
They'll
to.
be sold out tomorrow along with face masks.
British Knight says, the word handy in British accent should be considered haram. Britisher?
In my accent, which is handy.
It's very handy that the word handy
as
should be removed from
as opposed to my version of the Stephen Fry accent. Which was his version of a German camp accent, which was mein Handy, hab mein Handy verloren.
Please, dear God, nobody clip that. I need to know, yes, there are now several instances of the British saying mein Handy on this stream. Please take full advantage. The remixes, I expect remixes. And there we are. But there we go. Can we get the old Mark back? Has he had a voice transplant?
The old Mark, the nice one, the one we all liked.
Did Mark's balls drop? Let me see. All this stuff. Oh, I just had a voice transplant.
Yes, indeed. I think what we're all waiting for is you to begin in your performance, which obviously won't be it won't be Ivan Rebrov. Instead, it will be Paul Robeson, Old Man River, will it?
Oh dear. I do just want to update people because obviously for some of you who've been following on Twitter, although and I think I put something out on the community tab on YouTube as well. There were no Atrocity Project streams this week. Unfortunately, as most of you will be aware, my father, who had suffered a stroke, has been going through multiple trips to hospital. He was just on the cusp of coming home, and then he was torn away from us again by... he developed an infection on one side of his head, where they put the plate in to cover his craniectomy. So he had some fluid underneath the plate, some on top. They don't know what it is, but they had to remove the plate and drain the area and look after him, otherwise he was going to die. So, unfortunately, I had to shelve the atrocity project stuff in order to go back down south, just in case, and to look after the family. And it was good to go down and see him and the rest of them, and things seem to be okay. They're still doing cultures to try and work out exactly what it is that went wrong. They're sterilising the plate to put it back in. But I thought I'd just update everyone to make sure that everybody's caught up. It's been a while since I posted an update on the GoFundMe, etc. I could probably do a full briefing there. But yes, that's that side of things. Right, but moving on to brighter pastures, as it were. The Invidious Envy says, I say brighter pastures, the Invidious Envy says, did you see the Times article today, where someone likened the universities to the monasteries prior to the Reformation? The allusion was interesting. I have not seen the Times article, although if you link it to me through any of our social interactions, we can have a look at that. I'll definitely add it to the list. I have 3 big news stories for us today, really. I have the Priti Patel story, I have Ash Sarkar, and I have the NHS now. Oh yes, and the grooming gangs. I forgot about that. How could I forget? But let's start with the easy win, the low-hanging fruit that is Ash Sarkar's appearance on Question Time. I presume that you covered this at length on the week that was, Britisher.
No, I didn't.
You did not. You've had enough of her. You've decided that the only way to get rid of her is to refuse to engage.
Who is Ash Sarkar? No.
Dear.
No, I didn't. I didn't cover Ash Sarkar. No, I had various other things that sort of cropped up and took my fancy.
I see. Other than Ash Sarkar, luxury communist at large. Yes, I can imagine.
Yes, I mean, I have entertained myself with Ash Sarkar regarding her recent tweet in which she once again discusses whiteness. But yes, she is just utterly loathsome. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she decided to do a couple of things this last week. The first was to appear on Question Time and declare that immigrants as a whole are a net positive, and then wax lyrical about, there needs to be a humane component to this. My grandmother wouldn't have been able to come here as an immigrant under these new rules, and so I wouldn't exist. You're effectively attempting to erase my identity, was the subtext to that one there, and my existence as a woman of colour, etc. And in reality, we know full well the immigration statistics don't lie. I got into a lovely argument, should we call it a vivid discussion on Twitter? That beautiful melting pot of ideas.
Haven't we all had vivid discussions on Twitter?
Yes. Let me have a look here. This gentleman, who, to his credit, has not blocked me yet. Ash Sarkar, basically, in fact, I will play the audio for us, because I'm sure you will all delight to hear that. Britisher, I will link you to the tweet in question so that you can listen alongside, because I'm not sure how to make it so that you can hear as well. But there. I'm sure you already heard it before anyway.
On this matter of health tourism, what has been found is that migrants to this country bring more and contribute more in tax than they take out of the system. No, it's true. It's a fact.
Rubbish.
It's a fact. Sorry, facts don't care about your feelings. It's a fact. One is that migrants, particularly when they're young, they're working age, they're contributing to the private sector through the form of paying rent, through paying for their cost of living in this country, and they're also contributing to this country through taxes. When it comes to Britain, we have an ageing population, so you've got more and more people who will age out of the workforce, and at the moment, with our birth rates, we don't have enough people aging into the workforce to be able to support the kind of social care and pensions needs which are only going to grow. But one thing that I really want to say, because this is really important to me, is I don't want to just make the case for migration on GDP in the labour force. I want to make the human case for it. My grandmother came to this country, she was 17, and it was to fill a gap in the labour market which still exists, which was for social care. Under these rules, she wouldn't have been able to come to this country. She wouldn't have been able to meet my grandfather, fall in love, have children, have some grandchildren. I know not many of you will agree that all of her grandchildren were a good idea, but, we exist. And that's a human story.
So there we are. And are you there, Bridger?
One thing I would like to ask,
Go on.
just off the bat. Did anybody get to speak at length in the same manner without being interrupted by Ash Sarkar?
The woman who preceded her, the woman who started this tirade, was able to speak because she's somewhat of a kind of bolshy character herself, as it were.
Yes, but you know what I mean with the panel. These days, particularly female guests seem to sort of make it a speciality to just basically constantly interrupt everybody.
Oh, she made herself heard, and there was applause, and then they swiftly move on, rather than engaging with the actual points. There really wasn't there. I can't stand her. Look at me, no. The point is that her grandmother, even if she hadn't moved to this country, would probably have found a way, shall we say. It's not like suddenly she would have died, right?
I find sort of arguments, the way she's doing them sort of fairly disingenuous. Though, when it comes to net benefit, net burden, whatever, I mean, there's endless graphs and statistics and whatever, to the point where you just roll your eyes and just go, I don't care anymore, But when it comes to this idea of, oh well, my grandmother this, my grandmother that, it's basically the implication that things must remain the same, but the circumstances change.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not being willing to accept that circumstances will change, and then with the change of those circumstances, obviously there then also needs to be adaptation towards that, and that can mean that yes, immigration figures can go up, but they can also go down again. But this idea that it was once so, therefore it must always be so, that's just not an argument.
Yes.
No foreigner has any right. There is no God-given right. It's not a human right or whatever. No foreigner has any right to immigrate into Great Britain.
Yes, freedom of movement is not an innate human right.
And basically she is asserting that. She's saying, oh, well, it was once so, and therefore it must be so. And therefore one must simply be willing to welcome these people.
We also,
irrespective of what downsides there may be.
Not to mention the fact that we cannot save everybody, right? There's this concept that, she wouldn't have been able to come, and maybe things would have been tougher for her outside. It's like, yes, well, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, there's a really good TED talk about a chap who's talking about the way immigration works and the percentages involved. Even if it was like ignoring all of the financial stuff. I think he does it with gumballs. Have you seen it?
You say a TED talk? Is this Scandinavian guy who was the advisor to the UN with statistics?
Let me have a look. See, immigration, world poverty, and gumballs. It was. Let me have a look. See, it is Roy Beck.
No, that's not the one I mean. No.
Yeah, immigration author and journalist Roy Beck. He did one in 1996. I think he did an updated version sooner or later, more recently. But he basically gets these big stacks of jars of gumballs and explains what the net refugee and, this is only refugees and only people who need immigration statistics. And it's like 2 gumballs or something out of thousands. It's just like, there is no competition. If you took the whole of the rest of the world into the US, he's arguing at that point, then there would be no US. That's it. It just becomes like the rest of the world, and no one's any better off for it. And makes quite a compelling case. And I think that's also needs to be kind of duly noted, definitely. Object of Hate says, actually, the UN Global Migration Compact that the UK has signed does say that, yes, anyone can migrate anywhere. I need to look into the UN Global Migration Compact in that case, but I don't know much about it, unfortunately. People are saying borderless Britisher. Dear, dear.
Not quite sure what to make of that.
Well, somehow you've managed to come down neutrally and impartially, sort of half on Ash Sarkar's side, half on the.
No, not at all. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the problems I have with statistics. This is because I've kind of realized why we've ended up in the, how one sort of talks of the sort of post-truth, post-fact society.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is that everybody has beautiful, both sides of any argument have beautifully compiled charts stating the absolute truth,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where it just rolls over you. And that's how we've ended up in the position we're in. It's not just me. It's, I think, by now the majority of the population that just rolls their eyes the moment Ash Sarkar starts saying, "Oh no, that's absolute, that's fact." How she was telling that lady, "Oh no, facts don't care about your feelings. It's fact." And you just go, "Yeah," and I'm quite sure the opposite side is going to say exactly the same thing. And unless you do a degree in it yourself, you will never be able to tell which one is actually telling the truth. And therefore, in a way, we're almost operating by hunch, or effectively we're operating on the basis of what opinion we held prior to being presented with any of these facts. Do you know what I mean? It's again, everybody will say, "Oh, the British are being terribly anti-intellectual again." No, this is where we have been brought to by this sort of fake partisan academia on either side of everything, and therefore you just end up shrugging when they confront you with statistics and charts, because by now it just means nothing. I mean, how many times have you been confronted with a very detailed statistic or chart about something on which you were on the opposite side, and yet you look at it and you just go, "Well, I can't. Oh, what was that?" I think your microphone is going a bit AWOL.
Is it now? Okay.
Whoa!
We're very loud, are we?
Yes, very, very loud.
Do you mind? 1 second.
You are presently killing people, I think. Well, yes. Anyway, while Not So Obvious tries to fix his microphone, this is sort of my point, that basically you face a chart or a statistic of something that something in your bones tells you that's complete nonsense, but you have no way of basically refuting it, because it would require you to suddenly, become sufficiently expert on this in order to be able to compile counter statistics. And therefore, it just ends up, and the fact that we know that the opposite side of any argument we're on is by now capable of compiling these statistics, effectively means that you end up in a situation in which statistics become meaningless and facts become meaningless. And I know people will sort of think, "Oh, well, this is the British, anti-intellectual, sitting on the fence, yada, yada, yada." No, I would quite like to go back to the past, a past in my lifetime, in which statistics actually meant something. But now we've got that many pressure groups and that many think tanks and whatever who spend their entire time doing nothing else but coming up with this sort of, how should we say, creative accounting, that yes, it's become meaningless to most of us. Anyway, has Not So Obvious managed to fix his sound problems? Or hello?
Give me a second.
Okay, yeah, Houston, we have a problem. But it's yes. How much for me still to say on statistics? I think I perhaps ought to look at the chat and see whether anybody has anything to say with what I'm actually trying to communicate here, or if people just think I'm talking complete and utter gobbledygook as per usual.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah, this is much too much to read. Particularly, yes, I'm not very good at talking and reading at the same time. Therefore, yes, I just. Oh yes, I've got sound manual. The only statistics Britisher cares about: 36, 24, 36. Not far off. Yes, but as we all know, even those statistics can be faked. But. Yes, I can hear someone sighing deeply somewhere on the other end of the line. Have we had any success yet? Not so obvious?
I hope so.
Oh, no. You sound higher pitch now, but still much too loud.
Bear with.
Okay, better.
Oh, dear.
Okay, yes. This is bearable now. You're saying dear. I don't know if you're just saying it very faintly.
I don't know. I've adjusted the audio down, but I'm still way too loud. I'm sure.
Yeah, you're still coming in fairly heftily here.
I just want to access the old.
This may well turn into the what do they call those channels? Is it ASMR or whatever, isn't it? Where we've got you with the microphone turned up very loudly, whispering into the microphone, in order just to be bearable. No. Weren't those channels? I believe those channels were actually sort of demonetized in terms of PayPal, were they not? YouTube doesn't have a problem with them. YouTube allows them on. I believe YouTube keeps them monetized, but PayPal, more than likely, once again under pressure from credit cards or whatever, or possibly just off their own bat, decided that these things were too.
Britisher.
And you just think, well, come on, get over yourself. I don't really care what people get up to, but as we know, that's what makes me such an insufferable libertine.
Can you hear me now, Britisher?
Oh, yes, somewhere on a distant hill, about half a mile away from the microphone,
For goodness sake!
It's not so obvious at the moment.
What foolish person told me to reset the microphone? That's all I can say. How do I sound in chat? I have no idea.
You're now sounding a little bit better, so you've got your volume has gone up a bit again. Whereas when you first asked, you really were several, perhaps 50 yards away at least.
Right.
But now we can hear. It's no longer painful.
How's this?
Better. Okay. Chat, is he now sounding roughly right? Can you say something not so obvious in order for us to appreciate your silken voice again?
My name is not and will never be Ivan Rebrov. How's
that? Okay. That sounds much better. You sound normal again.
Oh.
And also, your voice sounds normal again.
Oh, rubbish. I don't want that. It's too quiet now. I sound a mile off. Yeah, it should hopefully improve in a second. Because people are not quite live. This is process.
Yeah, it's the delay, isn't it? Yes. No, to me you sound much better now.
Still what? Goodness. I can pop my
no better, little more higher.
You know, as
there you go. Craig Jovanovic or Jovanovic? I don't know. Says there you go. So that would suggest it's better. But others say too quiet and not to us.
I've just turned the volume up for chat, but not for you.
Okay.
So we'll see as we take that.
And it's good to have you back. Whoever that other person was, it's very good to have you back again.
I miss my bassy toe. No, I don't know what it was. Christ, man, how hard is it? Look, I just plugged the thing in, okay? Right? I just plug it in, expect it to work. I've used it before. It didn't have a problem last time. Boomer audio memes all round. I do apologise to everyone for having to deal with this nonsense. I'll tell you what, I'll just move myself a little closer.
It can... Live streams, I speak from experience, can indeed very easily become a complete and utter nightmare. If anything goes wrong with technology, you're suddenly having to fix it live on air, which is never a good place to be.
I know what you mean. Close enough, proceed. Trying to listen to two non-engineers trying to fix a microphone is better comedy than anything the BBC's put out in years. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that.
In order to try and sort of, circle back to the actual subject.
Oh, yeah.
While I was rabbiting on while you were trying to fix a microphone, what I was actually saying, does that make any sense to you, or do you just think I live completely in denial and am a completely anti-intellectual person who refuses to consider facts?
Not really. I think that what you're suffering through is the equation of kind of media persons and intellectuals, and what intellectuals actually think, and what they present the statistics as showing, as opposed to what statistics are interpreted to mean by the media and by other persons in the media. For instance, there is no study that I am aware of that looks at the balance of immigration net positive, net negative statistics that concludes that immigration as a whole is a net positive. None. There is one which concludes that members of the original EU14 are net positive to the tune of about £2,700 a month, I think. But there's nothing for overall figures that would say that. So when Ash Sarkar makes her claim and her whole facts don't care about your feelings thing, this is not at all controversial statistics. She's just wrong. She has read the statistics incorrectly. And as I was saying before we got too sidetracked by technical issues, I was saying, this is debunkable again and again and again. It's why is no one dismissing this easily disprovable myth? And a gentleman in the chat replied to me and he said, "Well, you prove it then." So you debunk it then with IE's rolling, etc. So I sent him the something which was linked to me from the the Oxford Migration Observatory, which was basically an analysis which was looking at all of them, which basically refuted everything that he said. He said that the majority of migrants come for work or study, bringing dependents, but generally it leads to an increase in the labour force, a decline in the dependency ratio, and increases the potential output capacity of the economy. I'm going, an increase in labour force is lower wages. GDP is not GDP per capita, and the most damning figures, which is the UCL from 2011, the same year as the census, say that it's anywhere between a 115 to 150 billion pound loss overall. That's including the net positive from the EU14. So it's a really bizarre position to take from her. Like, the fact that it wasn't challenged at all is a bizarre position to have happened. It's a bizarre situation to have happened. Because...
Well, you see, the problem you face is, you say you're not aware of any facts, you're not aware of anything, anyone having made this study and come up with that particular result. The problem is, this is not the first time I've heard someone say what she said.
No, because they released an article which they keep referring back to. It's always this one article which talks about migration as a positive. Let me just find it here, actually. Read what I sent you, he said.
You see, when you say nobody challenges it, assume for a moment someone would challenge it. And then let's assume for a moment someone, she does, in a manner of speaking, what I tended to do sometimes mockingly with AA, to say, oh, no, definitely. 1978, a study into immigration by Oppenheimer, Monheimer, and Pfaff. And what are you supposed to say?
Yeah, you say that that's 50 years out of date.
No, but do you understand what I mean? You just, well, yes, irrespective of whether it's 78 or 97 or whatever, you're confronted with names and a date, and you're on a panel show on television. What are you supposed to do with it?
As
do
long
you
as
understand what I mean?
but basically, you'd have to, like, if you were to present a counter argument, or if a counter argument was to be presented, then you'd have to basically say, like, why is your source credible, right? So, them quoting an Economist article, which, by the way, backs up my assertion that only the EU 14 nations provide a net benefit to the UK in terms of immigration. Like I said, they don't have a credible source. There's the difference. There's no credibility in their source. Even if they come back and they say, well, there's this study here. Well, all that happens is that the next week I have to write an op-ed, and then the next time someone runs into that source, they can refer to my op-ed on how that source is incorrect. Like that's the way it works. You know, if some new material is brought in, you have to go away and provide a counter to it if you've not come across it before. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay. I understand what you mean. I just still think that, as such, when it comes to statistics being arguments by now, due to the nature of how they're fired at people, there is just it just eventually becomes, you know,
the argument is not whether or not statistics are totally credible. If you can find flaws in them, that's great. The argument is whether or not statistics are more credible than lived experience, which in most cases they are.
Well, this always depends on, you know, what you're actually being fed, and that's the problem. And the main issue, I really think a great many people have out there. I mean, that's why one is talking of the post-fact society. It's simply that everybody is just looking at this stuff going, there is no way that we can possibly know which side is right. And both of them are coming at us with statistics and charts and tables and whatever. And
I'm sorry, Bridget, I don't know how to make an increasingly complex world more simplistic for the everyday person. Without training everyone in advanced stats, which I can't
well, you know,
do.
it's not as if somehow, you know, something like the 1980s were just complete, you know, it was the Stone Age. But back then, what was not yet the case was that the sort of partisan camps hadn't yet had the time and the funds to kind of turn whatever they decided are facts into sort of weapons that they could fire at each other, which you know, a left-wing think tank has one particular set of statistics to which the others then develop this or that rebuttal, to which they then again over time develop this or this rebuttal. Yes, this is because they're think tanks. They have nothing else to do all day. That's their job. But for the normal person out there, you know, Joe Blogs, how on earth are they supposed to deal with this?
I mean, I don't know
and
how
that's when you just end up throwing up your that's where you just end up shrugging when people on controversial subjects present you with statistics.
I mean, I don't know how to. I mean, without preventing the entire progress of human knowledge, I don't know how to. I don't know how to remove this problem from your view, Joe Blogs. But I understand that it is complex, which is why we have sources we all consider to be credible. This is the trouble. And as we all know, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can make them say whatever you want them to say. It's very rare to find it's less clear in economic data because it's more clear where the holes are in it. But in science, certainly, especially when it comes to, as someone in one of the soft sciences, the social sciences, I know full well that there are all sorts of holes, all due to a thing we call operationalization. So, have you operationalized your variables? which basically means how are you defining them, which is completely unique to that experiment and might have no bearing whatsoever on a colloquial definition. So, and it may not even encompass the thing you're measuring in the first place. So yes, there are damn lies in statistics. And people tend to want to infer a lot of causation from the vast majority of science, which is not causal. You can only ever infer causality from a true experiment. We have woefully few of those. And the ones that we do have of those rarely measure accurate human behaviour. So there you go. That's what it is.
Meh is saying things went south after the Iron Curtain fell. This might correlate. Who knows? My view of things are things went south. When think tanks and whatever started sprouting up out of the ground like never before, and I dread to think what the future will bring in that regard.
Damn you, Douglas Murray!
Yes. But aside from that, I would also say things started going south when professors were no longer white-haired eccentrics with pipes and bow ties, but instead are 28, 30-year-olds with very strong opinions. But maybe that's just me. But no, the reason this is one of my sort of chief frustrations is because this happened within my own lifetime. And it really is something where I've kind of observed the reliability of anything coming your way these days. You just get cynical towards it. And this isn't just one side or the other. It's, one day one side will lie to you and the other day the other side will lie to you. And you're just looking at it and you just become completely cynical.
You try to tell me that you are staring into the void at the moment, Britisher, and it's staring back into you.
When it comes to sort of the war of statistics and facts and whatever, yes, I think we've sort of crossed the threshold where it's just becoming ever and ever more meaningless to the general population, and I think part of the nature of our politics today is due to that. So the reason we have got these people who just will cheer Donald Trump no matter what is because folks have become cynical towards believing anything that comes from any source. And I don't just mean because, CNN this and whatever, but just generally because we by now live in a day and an age where facts, yes, the wonderful statistics that they may show you on television just are meaningless. But I think the same thing has happened on the other side, that the left have also just become completely disbelieving of what they regard as facts being told to them. And therefore, yes, I think that's one of the chief malaises of our day. That
you're assuming that politics has ever been about facts and rather than emotion.
No. I'm please don't think that I'm somehow looking at
No. I understand what you're saying. I just don't think that there's a golden ratio of the obtuseness and complexity of facts versus the establishment of emotional issues.
It's just, it's not a matter of sort of looking at the past with rose-tinted spectacles. Politicians have always lied. It's always been a dirty game. It's never been, there has never been a wonderful time and we've somehow lost it. That's not what I'm trying to get at. It's that we have never had, how shall we say it? I think the way I would compare it is, how big corporations these days and very rich people can avoid tax left, right, and center these days?
Absolutely.
Because nowadays there are massive accountancy corporations with absolutely the creme de la creme of sort of tax avoidance specialists.
Well, the more laws there are, the more loopholes exist.
Yes, but what I mean is, if you would go back in time, those services wouldn't have been there for the rich to call on, if you know what I mean. And what has happened in a way when it comes to sort of the political think tankery and academia is that something similar has happened. That we've in a way created these bodies who just specialize in sophistry. And
British, I can't believe you want to bomb Dresden again.
yes, precisely.
I don't understand where this is all leading to. I understand that you've decided that we live in a post-fact society and that you don't need facts to justify your reason for firebombing civilians, but it's just such a strange line to take on a comedy and light-hearted current event show.
Yes, of course. Yeah. No, it's when I say post-fact society, of course we all still try to rely on facts and whatever, but it's when it comes to these highfalutin, really high controversial subjects in which we know that for the last 10, 15 years, both sides have been sharpening their tools and they just rattle them off against each other. And for the rest of us, we're completely out of the loop.
Right, let's talk climate change then. I am joking.
By the way, did you see there was some tweet that was doing the rounds of Greta preparing to call for a school strike again?
Yeah, she's going to join us in Britain or something.
Yes, but there was a picture, there was a photograph with the kind of artwork that was the kind of poster for the school strike. But there was a photograph, and you looked at that photograph and you went, "What is she, 12?"
Oh yes, she looked very young, didn't she?
And you just think this is just absolutely unbelievable how they are trying to make this girl look as absolutely impish and childlike as possible.
The cherub of the left. Yes, I was in Brighton, because my dad was at Brighton Hospital, and we drove past several murals of Greta Thunberg.
Oh dear God!
Which have been erected on various buildings around Brighton. That was entertaining. But I don't really want to talk about.
So what you're saying is that if you drive through the streets of Tehran, you will have pictures of Ayatollah Khomeini and Ayatollah Khamenei on murals inside buildings. But if you go through Brighton, you have Greta Thunberg.
Obviously.
There's a parallel there somewhere.
Only for yourself, Richard. Only for yourself. So the Envy has sent me this article: "Out of Touch Universities Are Losing the Nation's Trust." Policy Exchange Report 5. This is apparently the. I go back to the super chat. He was saying someone likened the universities to the monasteries prior to the Reformation. So that's why we're interested in this. So it says, grade inflation, fat cat pay, and a sneering attitude towards patriotism have meant universities have lost the trust of the nation, according to vice-chancellors and senior governors. They fear Britain's higher education sector is viewed as out of touch and is a sitting duck for the government as it draws up policies to appeal to newly won northern seats. The biggest thing that I've actually noticed with the universities is that everyone, both foreign and domestic students, have said that they think that British universities, as they understand them, are trading on a reputation they no longer uphold. It doesn't matter if they work in universities, doesn't matter if they are high-flying students or low-grade students, doesn't matter what country they come from, they all agree. Especially the I've noticed it a lot amongst the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Brazilian students who say, we expected really quality education. My friend who lives in Italy, or my friend in Spain, or my friend in Portugal, is at university and it's far more demanding, and they seem to be getting more out of it than we get over here. So it's that's, I think, the prevailing knowledge. I wonder how long it will be before the British institution falls from its tower of grace, as it were, as providing the best of the best. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I would sort of say there are two impressions I have. One is, I mean, you know, as such, you're completely right. You're just to start with, you're completely right. It's the BBC all over again, isn't it? They're basically something trading on the reputation of years gone by. But its present state is nothing like that. Now, two impressions I have is when it comes to the public losing trust, as the years go by, an ever greater proportion of the British population will have had a social studies professor on television or something like that, and been able to sample the level of absurdity that is coming from some of these institutions. You know, I mean, as I say, just listen to Ash Sarkar talk about whiteness and how it's a composite. You know, in her Twitter video.
Yeah.
You know, and you listen to that and you hear academic drivel pour forth.
There's
And
a
you go, okay, yes, this is nonsense.
there's a great quote. I'm trying to remember who said it. It's one of the basically one of the guys who came up with who did the first set of analyses on statistical methods on psychometrics, and he said that psychology specifically he was talking about, but I think I can apply it to several other disciplines as well, is taking things that everybody knows and describing it in language that nobody understands.
Yes, yeah, but
yes,
you know, what is it? Kahinda something, isn't it? Is the Black Studies professor at Liverpool University, the one they once in a while ask on Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan, and he will always tell you how whiteness is a psychosis and how the British Empire was worse than the Nazis, and how you know, the what was it, the bomber pilots of World War II shouldn't have a memorial and things like that. He you know, everything that was white prior to the Windrush, everything was Britain prior to Windrush is just terrible, ghastly, and hideous. You know?
I see.
The longer you have people like that coming on mainstream media, the more it will undermine public belief in these institutions.
Yes.
Aside from that, there is also another aspect, and you know, obviously now I'm getting anecdotal, but way back when, I helped a foreign student.
You did what, you
Oh yes,
disgusting
yes.
monster!
This was. It gets worse. It gets worse if you really want to be traumatized. This was a student who was being, you know, the tuition and everything was being paid for her by the Soros project.
Oh, never mind her. I understand now, Richard.
Yes. So she was she was from Bulgaria, and she was. It was all part of preparing Bulgaria for the entry into the European Union.
The Great Unification.
Yes, yeah, Bulgaria for the entry into the European Union. So this was not just Bulgaria; this was various other countries in Eastern Europe.
Okay.
So it was kind of thought that, you know, one would help to bring their political institutions up to speed, and kind of expose them to some of, you know, Western academic learning on the various subjects. So she was in Britain to study what was it, international relations, I think it was called.
Yeah, politics.
And I was asked to help her out because obviously she could speak English, but it obviously being a second language and you're in a foreign country trying to study in a language that isn't your own, it does help if you've got someone there who can perhaps, you know, explain terminology differently if you don't get it first time round.
I see. So you lived in Bulgaria.
Of course, yes. No,
I understand
but
now.
close enough. Yeah.
Yes, and now you keep calling Tailed Feature Bulgarian, and the whole thing is just.
It's just yeah, it's a conspiracy. It all makes sense now.
Yes.
But so she did this international relations, and I must admit, I was never as underwhelmed as as at that particular moment, because I've not gone to university, you know. So
Yes, I gathered that, British
yes. So I had this view of
thicko.
university being this high temple of learning, and I did get the impression that, I mean, you may well say, well, it was just that particular course. It could well be. I don't know, but it struck me as a bit of a sausage machine. That you felt that as long as the right books had been read and one simply quoted the right quotations from the relevant sectors, then one was fine.
Yes, the difficulty comes when it comes to I'm definitely not. How long ago was this, by the way? This was
I mean, I'm struggling here, but 15 years, something like that.
okay, fair enough. So I'm just trying to make sure it's not too far back. The big thing with it is like 60% ish of any given degree course gets a 2-1, right? And then maybe 25 to 30% get a lower grade, 5% fail, and 5% get a first. That's the general trend. At least it is in all of the disciplines that I've been privy to. But academic success in that regard has absolutely no bearing on future career success. It has no bearing on life success. So it's only the exceptional people, and that's not talking about the academic exceptionals. It's only the exceptional people who can make use of a degree to a relevant extent. It's all a case of supply and demand as well. I had fun looking at all of the statistics for back to statistics now. Looking at all the statistics for the people who had left my university to see how many of them had actually gone on to pursue a career in psychology. And the answer was that in the last 8 years, 2 students had made it through to a clinical psychology program. None of them had ended up in an actual trade. Like, most of them were retail, like 80%, or were stay-at-home mothers, which was interesting. And I feel like, yes, the university system as it stands, the way it's funded currently, and the way in which it uses those funds, and the ways in which it is obscured how they use your funds, all contribute to this really opaque kind of sausage machine thing where the first year of your degree doesn't count because you're just trying it out, but that just means that everyone really gets onto the second year of the degree and no one drops out, which means that, oh yes, we do get to extract another £10,000 from you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I fully understand what you mean. I just, at the time, as I say, I'm struggling regarding I've sort of been thinking 15, 20 years, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was the days when Francis Fukuyama was the darling of politics, and I pride myself in being exposed to Francis Fukuyama through having to check various texts and whatever, and concluding this is complete nonsense. And yes, he since has recanted. But yes, it was kind of almost sort of religiously following these scriptures because it's Francis Fukuyama, and you just went, but it's nonsense, it's bollocks. It's how should we say? I think much of my attitude regarding academia is coloured by the outbreak of SJWism and by that experience of helping someone to their degree when I just felt it was largely nonsense. It was largely just essay pushing. I understand to a certain extent, what you were saying before about only 2 people went on to actually do psychology in 8 years worth. I understand to a certain extent many of these subjects are not necessarily studied because one literally wants to get into that subject. I think quite a few courses at university are sort of almost like a sort of a rite of passage kind of thing, whereby you've proven that you can do a degree, irrespective of what
So
the subject actually is.
a lot of people have that attitude, or it's a case of their parents made them do it, or it's a case of I didn't know what else to do, but I knew I would have fun at university because people say they have fun at university, and it means that I can live for a little longer, not worrying about the job market.
I remember way back when I read a book called Liar's Poker, and it was the
Are you sure you
memoir.
want to? Are you sure you want to describe your erotica on stream, Richard?
It was these were the memoirs of a trader in Wall Street. Way back when, sort of in the height of things, and uh, he basically says, "Well, I studied philosophy."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether it was Goldman Sachs he worked for. But anyway, it was one of these venerable Wall Street institutions.
Yeah.
It could have been Solomon Brothers, I'm not sure. But he kind of said, the rot really set in, if I'm honest, when they started hiring people like me.
Oh.
And he said, because if you think of it, I had studied philosophy. What the hell did I know about the subject at hand?
Yeah.
And in a way, yes, that he had studied philosophy, but the banks and these financial institutions were visiting the universities looking for graduates.
Yeah.
So that's just it. That okay, you've had this rite of passage. You're now a graduate. So now you are the kind of material we are prepared to work with, irrespective of what what you have actually, whether what you have studied has any relevance.
That
to
must have really been something worth doing back when university courses were, shall we call them, more competitive. Because I can see
But
where it would come in, and
it's,
then as soon as it became like kind of everyone must do it free for all, and the degree was massive. The biggest thing I noticed, right, is like, so I take the broad brush statistic where 60% of students, regardless of discipline, get a 2-1. The students I know who are on par for a 2-1, even if it's a lower 2-1, they're distinctly categorized. There's basically around a third of them are really hard working. They could achieve first if they wanted to. They won't necessarily, but they could if they wanted to. Then another 20% or so are kind of solidly in the middle, and the other half are layabouts, very lazy, and are really only there for the... Like, I went to a seminar the other day. I sat down, the 3 people next to me boot up the program for the seminar, and then they go and they chat to one another, and they talk on their phones. I said, "You're not going to do the exercise." "Oh, we're just here for attendance. We're just here for attendance." And these are people who I know will achieve either a high 2-2 or a low 2-1. They might just fluke their way into the 2-1 category. But if you're an employer and you're looking at whether or not you're going to hire someone, you have a 50-50 coin flip like that about whether or not you have someone utterly useless with no work ethic whatsoever who will turn up but is incapable, or you have someone who's actually fairly decent at a job, or someone who's exceptional on the other hand. It's really tricky, isn't it? And you can see why it devalues, why people don't want to degree. You don't want 50% of your graduates to come out and being completely useless. That's not helpful at all.
Well, yes, once upon a time, having a degree actually put you in quite a rarefied air. Whereas now, yes, it's no longer really that sort of selective thing. And therefore, yeah, I can see where you're going. By the way, there has just been a confession in the chat. Rubber is out and about.
Yes.
And he's just said, "I am glad I did wish I'd worked a bit harder, and it helped me in lots of ways. But then again, I did a normal degree in history."
Rude.
So there you go. He did a degree in history. So
Right.
we now have something to quiz him on, don't we? Next time we come across him.
So I'm just going to go whiz through the rest of this article and then jump onto the super chat, so I don't get too far behind. Authors of the report from this is regarding whether or not the higher education sector is out of touch. Just to remind us, authors of the report from Policy Exchange, a think tank Britisher, a think tank set up by Michael Gove and other senior Tories when they were in opposition.
Oh dear God, a think tank set up by Michael Gove. Can there be anything worse in the imagination of mankind?
Chaired by Rubber Comedy. Interviewed 50 vice-chancellors and chairmen of university governing bodies. Their findings suggest there is a growing frustration within higher education universities' inability to modernise and reform themselves. Universities must show that they speak for and reflect the whole nation, the report said, adding that leaders should avoid being the voice of critics who actively despise those with the traditional values of patriotism, family, faith, or local tradition. It found instances of governance failures at 20 universities in recent years, and said vice-chancellors' pay had been particularly poorly handled. Governing bodies who handed out the pay rises kept their heads down and left vice-chancellors to justify their own salaries with varying success. So, just having a scroll through here, it looks like there's an issue. Basically, they were dealing with the fact that universities are talking about expanding the number of undergraduates they admit, and at the same time, they're going, oh, why couldn't we increase our numbers when we trebled the tuition fees to £9,000? Yes, seems slightly ridiculous. Make it more expensive, and funnily enough, people say you're out of touch, don't they?
Isn't there a line in Yes Minister where Sir Humphrey visits his university and he's told that because of them trying to flog what is it?
They want to reduce.
Professors are roaming Africa trying to flog sociology degrees to the native. That was just it's. There is so much that is politically incorrect these days in a Yes Minister that just makes it all the more lovable.
It is. It's proving itself more accurate with every passing day. I do love the show. Truly phenomenal. Right, so the Harry Channel, a little while ago, an hour in fact, so I apologise for the lateness of this, said, I find it ironic that Ash Sarkar, a descendant of immigrants, is doing nothing to contribute to GDP. If the BBC wasn't funded through taxation, she'd probably have no income at all. I don't know if she's paid by the BBC, but I can't think that Novara Media pulls in anything like a livable wage for. I think there's 4 of them who do it, but I don't know. Let me see how they do. Novara Media. Okay, and excluding any sponsors and anything like that, let's have a look at how much.
We can't go on like.
Excuse me. How much they actually make. 1 second. Let me go here. Assuming, of course, that they're a monetized YouTube channel as well as anything else, and they get paid retainers on top of things. But they get roughly £1,000 a month between 4 of them. So, not very much, I would say. I don't know.
Yes, but when you're looking at Ash Sarkar, a columnist for The Guardian, clearly will be, if not already has, publishing books about her worldview, which will no doubt be bought by the correct chattering classes. So yeah, I don't think the young lady will be struggling anytime soon.
Oh, I doubt it. Like her biggest claim to fame was calling Piers Morgan an idiot, right?
I mean, she's the female Owen Jones, isn't she? That's fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah, I just don't want her to become a millionaire as well. You know?
And you've got the feeling, well, Owen Jones, how many books has he written by now?
3 books. He wrote Chav.
Yeah, that was the first one. That's yeah. So yeah, it's I think that is clearly sort of the projected course, isn't it?
Oh, she has an estimated net worth of $1 million.
Oh, well, there you go.
Grim. Not. There we are. The voice of Sarkar, as Rubber calls it.
You know, once just as with Owen Jones, you know, once they then have a few years on the clock, they will then be seen as the sort of elder statesman among the colonists and whatever.
There'll never be a Ben, will they? Toby Ben.
They will be they will obviously then be paid more due to their seniority, and who knows, they might then even be consulted in an advice capacity by high-ranking politicians and so on.
No, Britisher, don't make me nihilistic. I don't like it.
Because otherwise you'll end up where I am, and you won't be trusting any statistics anymore, will you?
I don't trust statistics in the first place, Britisher. I look where they come from. I look at what composes them. I can read them. I have qualified. Goodness me. Yeah. Let me see. Navarro Media keeps getting struck at company's house for failing to file proper accounts. It's probably because they have no idea what to do with accountancy. But I appreciate that, Bill. What's going on there? EC90 says, Mark, why is your voice weird? I don't know what you're talking about, EC90. My voice is as crisp and as clear and
as ever
velveteen as it has ever been. So appreciate that, though. It was an issue with the microphone. The new IKB says, Greta will end up needing therapy one day. I feel sorry for her. I hope that one day she will be able to be just a child again. I blame the parents. There's nothing I disagree with in there, Britisher. Yourself?
Well, but then she will be the attention of the media all over again. We'll then have a new narrative to talk about.
What do you mean?
Well, then she will be suffering due to her traumatic past.
Oh, if she was in the therapy, yeah. I make no bounds about it. I think that someone is waiting for her to make a suicide attempt, and they're rubbing their hands together greedily, just waiting for it. No, that's not Douglas to anyone in particular. That's not what I mean. I genuinely, I feel like they are making money off her misery, and it's not going to end well. Yes, this is not a stream about climate change, so we'll move swiftly on. Hinchstar has written a limerick for us. There was a young man called Marky, whose new mic made him sound like a darky. Britishers still posh, and a little bit bosh, while they talk about news and various malarkey. Oh dear. And I've just realised that there's something a little bit racist in there. Oh dear, no.
I shall never forgive the Bosch bit.
Of course not. You're more like the saucepan than the pot, anyway.
Just because I happen to speak a bit of German, which apparently one learns in Bulgaria.
You learn many things in Bulgaria, Britisher. No doubt you learned how to survive. But, yes. Rising CO2 causing depression, says Father Boris. I wouldn't be surprised if people started getting ECs. Students will use any excuse these days to get an exclusion credit for some sort of climate-based depression. Really terrible. Oh dear. So what we talked about so far, we talked about migrants contributing more or less than they actually do. We've talked about the universities not doing what they want to do. Yes, this is the big one I wanted to talk about, the SNP. I really hope that we had a tail feature on this evening. But unfortunately, he has not replied to any of my entreats.
This is the SNP with their voting malarkey and allowing stand for office and so on.
They have given the right to vote to refugees and prisoners.
Yes.
Prisoners.
Did you hear that the Greens they went further? They proposed that one should give it to asylum seekers. So people who hadn't been accepted as refugees yet. So one hadn't yet decided whether one wanted to allow them to stay. But they should also have the vote. So that was the Green Party.
Oh,
No, you know how you mentioned before that about the Ash Sarkar thing? Surely I mentioned it on the week that was. Well, this I definitely mentioned on the week that was. It the way I looked at it was this is kind of the ultimate contradiction in terms, if you know what I mean. That you have got the party that sets itself up as the nationalists, then wanting to hand the franchise to anybody because one wants to break away from the English yoke.
Yes.
And you just go, yeah.
So you're handing yourself the yoke of everyone else in the known world. Yes, I'll read the article. Prisoners, foreign citizens, and refugees, you have secured the right to vote in Scottish elections under historic legislation passed yesterday. It'd be funny if they were like, it was then repealed by Jamaica, who utilised their entire voter base to vote against it. I don't. The franchise has been extended both for Holyrood and local council elections. To become law, it required a supermajority of 86 members of the Scottish Parliament to vote in favour, and this is the first time this has ever happened. So the first time in Scottish history that they managed to come together over a single issue. It happens to be in order to give away the power of citizenry to foreign nationals.
Yep.
Only the Conservatives opposed the law, with SNP, Labour, the Greens, and the Scottish Liberal Democrats united to ensure that it was passed by 92 to 27.
I could well imagine that the Tories just gained a wheelbarrow full of votes in Scotland.
Possibly. Interestingly, though, Brisha, asylum seekers will continue to face voting restrictions after after a proposal by the Scottish Green Party was voted down. Mike Russell, the Constitution Secretary, said that whilst he had the greatest sympathy for that suggestion, this was undermined by practical concerns. So they would do it if they could.
The emphasis was obviously on this was undermined by practical concerns, unlike, of course, all the other. No,
indeed.
You know where I went with in order to kind of highlight the ridicule of this.
Yeah.
You know, who do they always like to evoke? The SNP. There is a particular historical figure that they particularly like a lot. Mel Gibson.
Yes, I was thinking a certain William Wallace.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think William Wallace would make of this?
I don't know, Richard. He was hung, drawn, and quartered by the English before he could achieve anything of note.
What do you think Robert the Bruce would make of this? So, you know, the very sort of cornerstone historical figures of Scotland. I mean, what would they make of, and by the way, we've just handed the vote to, well, anybody. It's just unreal. And not just the vote. It's not just the vote. Also, a large proportion of them will be able to stand for office.
Indeed. It's bizarre. The thing which sets a citizen apart from everybody else at this point, it used to be, obviously ethnic heritage. In a world where travel is basically nothing at the moment, the only thing which sets them apart is their right to vote, to exercise their franchise, to influence the nation that they live in. And to take that away from people is to effectively erase the people. The people no longer exist except in an ethnic community sense. You know, there's no citizenry. There is no border. There simply cannot exist. All you have is an arbitrary line in the sand, and there's no reason to say that someone who lives far away from Scotland shouldn't be able to vote in Scotland, because there's no cultural impetus, there's no checks, there's no balances on what is required in order to prove that you have a tie, whether or not that is an interest, a vested investment, or a cultural background in said nation. It's bizarre to me.
Well, I mean, they're just trying to make out that the demos in democracy is just simply whoever is there.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hang on a moment, there's a difference between the citizenry and the non-citizenry. And there has always been a difference.
And there should be a difference. That's the thing.
For heaven's sake, the Romans fought a civil war over this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just, I don't know. This is really one of the sort of, keystone things where you sort of wonder, well, the whole structure could collapse if you no longer make a you draw any distinction between citizen and non-citizen.
Who has spiked their tea? What have they been smoking?
Well,
carry on.
The way I explain it to myself is, this is all down to their having talked themselves into a corner. So they've, how should we say, at the moment, I mean, let's face it, the SNP, the only thing they're interested in, I mean, the Lib Dems will have a different reason or whatever, but the SNP, the only thing they're interested in is independence.
Yeah.
Everything is subservient to that idea. So the first thing they need another referendum. Now, they had one, they lost it. And, referenda are supposed to be held once every generation.
Well, they defined, unlike Brexit, they defined how long it would be. I think it was 14 years. They said it would have to be.
But they need a referendum, because one of the things that is their problem is they're riding high in Scotland. Things go down as well as up, particularly in politics. Mm-hmm. You cannot hope to hold such a preeminent position in politics forever.
No.
So
once
they want
the job that you have been elected to do is done, then you need to find something new to do, or you will disappear.
So they want, they want this referendum while the going's, and they need it. And the only thing that matters is independence, and the only thing that matters is the referendum. Now, how have they argued their need for a referendum? Well, you see, Brexit, the EU. We love the EU. Everybody in Scotland holds a deep, passionate love for the EU.
Don't forget, Scotland voted to remain.
Oh yes, yeah. This little rainy part of Britain to the north is deeply in love with this bureaucratic institution.
Yes, not the continent. Note, just the institution.
We must be part of Mother Europe. We cannot possibly be torn away from her loving bosom. We must be part of this, and therefore they're kind of painting this image of Scotland being completely and utterly in love with Europe, with foreigners. It's only the little Englanders, it's only the small-minded Brexiteers who are xenophobic and racist and whatever, whereas they are the absolute opposite. And do you understand how they paint themselves into this position, and then they seek to find any means by which to further demonstrate that?
Yeah,
and we've just seen it demonstrated.
Indeed, although be encouraged, British prisoners. It's only prisoners serving a sentence of 12 months or less who will be allowed to vote.
Well, with prisoners, there is a debate: should they, shouldn't they, whatever. I don't see that big a problem, because
the reason that this is important is because the only reason that they have extended this to prisoners as opposed to the others is because this has been extended in order for Scotland to comply with the European Convention on Human Rights.
Of course. And, of course, in order to assure that next time Count Dankula tells a joke online, he will still be able to vote once they lock him up.
You're assuming that he won't be jailed for life next time, of course. He said the extending the vote. This is Mr. Russell. He's the Constitution Secretary. He said, extending the vote to citizens of other countries was driven by the reality and aspiration of modern Scottish society, and I'm going to add on the end here, to abolish itself. because that's what you're doing, effectively. EU and Commonwealth citizens already have the franchise in Scotland. We must also recognise the enormous contribution brought to our country from people from all over the world, which is why we are extending the right to vote in our devolved elections to all foreign nationals resident in Scotland who have leave to remain. And he describes this as a major step forward. Well, I remember something else that was described slightly similarly as the Great Leap Forward. Perhaps that's a conflation too far.
Or also there is, if you remember your Blackadder goes forth, there is also the Great Push.
Indeed.
That also ended very well.
Things which are great are not necessarily good, I think we should take away.
Except, of course, for Great Britain.
Yes. That's why I said not all. That's why I said not all. Mark Ruskell, the Green member of the Scottish Parliament, had tried to amend the legislation so that asylum seekers whose cases were still being considered could be given the vote, as they could be in limbo for several years waiting for a decision. The right to vote is seen by asylum seekers as a fundamental human right, he said. For many it is seen as being even as important as the right to work. It is an acknowledgement of their very existence, an acknowledgement that they have a voice and they are valued.
Where have I heard that before? Oh yes, trans people.
Everyone with a single...
their very existence. But basically, to not use their pronouns is to challenge their very existence. And in the case of asylum seekers, to not allow them to vote is to challenge their very existence.
It's basically, because they're saying, we have to extend the hand of humanity, which is not necessarily, it's not necessarily the case. What we have to do is give them the opportunity that if they wish to, they can extend themselves and with their own moral imperative to show and prove and present themselves as people who Scotland should value, that Britain should value. People, you have an inherent value as a human being. That's why we offer asylum seekers asylum in the first place. That's not in question. The question is your tie to the land, the investment that you're going to put into the country, which ensures that you have a vested interest in the way it is run and the way it's run to make sure that it's run properly. And the reason we have cultural things as a part of the citizenship test, which includes things like the language, it includes things like the history, it includes things like basic skills and knowledge, etc., that sort of thing, is in order to prove that you are interested enough in the place you are immigrating to, that you want to be a part of it. You're interested enough for us to take an interest in you. Does that make sense? I just don't understand why abolishing all of that and saying, actually, the impetus is on us to extend the franchise of our nation to anyone because you have the right. No, you don't have the right. You have the privilege if you are a citizen of a nation. That citizenship is a privilege conferred on you by birth or by proving your investment and your interest. Nothing
And you
more.
are already the citizen of another nation.
And you are indeed, yes. No one can be left stateless. That is true. Which brings us on to things like dual citizenship, actually. Because I'm curious what your feelings are on it. Whether or not you think it's possible to be dual citizen of a nation, or whether or not you think that it's something of a fad that we should get rid of.
No, I don't have any problems with people being dual citizens at all.
Fair enough.
Do you think that you can basically own a sort of part of one nation, so to speak?
I'm just curious about it because I know that a number of other nations don't allow dual citizenship.
I think for a while the Americans didn't allow it, did they? But I think they've changed that since.
But it struck me as a slightly weird thing. It seemed perfectly natural, but it was just more of a convenience thing for me. It was like, of course you've got ties back home, you've got ties here, but whether or not you should be allowed to effectively have this kind of dual ties, I can understand how it is perfectly reasonable in peacetime, but how if ever you went to war...
Yes, I can imagine that if to war... if you're basically on both sides of the war, if you're part of either warring faction, then yes, I think it's fair to say that might present a problem. Then again, I mean, it depends on. I'm just sort of thinking of there's that Hornblower episode in the TV series
Right.
in which there is a Frenchman who is among them, and Hornblower is always suspecting that he might be the traitor because he's a royalist Frenchman. But of course, because he's a Frenchman, you would sort of think there's a good chance he's actually on the side of the French. But he turns out not to be. And basically he is the royalist Frenchman. So obviously he hasn't got anything to do with the Republican Frenchmen's.
Yes.
Frenchmen's. Heaven's sake, please someone stop me.
French persons.
Yes. No.
French people kind?
So it is possible. I mean, if you think of, say, an Afghan, but someone who's dead set against the Taliban. Do you understand what I mean? You could see how you could be an Afghan and a Briton and still be on the British side in the conflict. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Albeit, I admit, it's yeah. Your initial instinct is, yes, that would be difficult in a conflict, and one would understand that perhaps in the case of a major war or whatever, those might be the people who also get sent to the Isle of Man.
I'm thinking I need to make a video actually on because thinking about dual citizenship, split loyalties, maybe think about countries and minorities in countries and that sort of thing. It's all a bit tangential, but I need to create a video called "Why the Left Think Diversity is a Strength" and break down the literature which underpins it, which I think is very easy to get your head around and also easy to see how it's flawed. Just reminded me there. Sorry about that. So as opposed to engaging what you actually said, I just went off on a complete jibs and can't remember a thing that you actually mentioned. So there we go.
Well, it's something I often face. It's more than likely to do with the fact that what I say is not necessarily always that memorable. But there you go. Story of my life.
Apologies, Britisher.
You're fine.
Pyrrhus of Epirus says, "I'm in Alabama." But I'm sorry, I can't do an Alabama accent for you.
No, it must be Albania.
Alabama. I'm in Alabama, but I'm running for the Scottish Parliament seat of Edinshire due to vote Republican. The thing with this is, right, is where do they draw the line when they say, you must be resident in Scotland, right? Does that mean you have to be resident in Scotland, or do you just simply have to have a residency in Scotland?
I wish I could tell you.
To this effect, could I, if I owned a house in Scotland, sell off 1 by 1 foot square patches in my garden to anyone I wanted to online around the world for, say, a tenner each, and then they have the franchise to vote in Scotland? That's what regardless of how small. Or maybe it's a 3 by 3 foot square, that's considered to be livable in. Given that you could just say that you're homeless, etc., etc. Is it simply that if you are in the country at the time the election is called, could you vote there? Because
no, I think you need to be resident.
I know you need to be resident, but are they actually checking for it anymore? That's the question. We'll have to see what it is. But it's a bizarre.
Didn't they sell? When you were saying there about selling a square foot.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't they sell didn't they sell square feet of the moon? I'm sure you were able to own something on the moon or on Mars, weren't you?
I'm pretty sure you can own various stars as well, yes. Whether or not that's actually enforceable is another thing entirely. Yes. Let me see where we are. The Conservative MSP, going back to Scotland again, said, "There can be little hiding from the fact that this bill will bring prisoners into our elections, and it will be a consequence of a decision made here in Holyrood, not one of compliance with a court in Strasbourg. Many simply disagree that prisoners, people who have stepped beyond the rules set by our society, should have the right to vote for those who set the rules, while they are still being punished and still have yet to be rehabilitated and reintegrated. While he admitted that only around 900 prisoners would be eligible to vote, he said the SNP had jettisoned its own principles. Whereas a policy officer with the Scottish Refugee Council rebutted, "This is a significant moment. The right to vote is a crucial human right that everyone in Scotland should be able to enjoy." So there we go. There's nothing there about kind of illegals, effectively, or refugees, or anything like that. That has been said by the Conservatives. They won't even confront that part of it. They only confronted the prisoners part. They haven't dealt with everything else, which is a shame. I'm incensed enough by this article as it is. I feel sorry for all my Scottish brethren up north, and the Britisher, who I take it is somewhere near the border.
Who knows? I might still be in Bulgaria.
So there is one more article for this evening. Oh, two really. We could stretch to two, couldn't we? Diane Abbott is to stand down from the shadow cabinet. So she said she's
Well, I mean, there's a surprise.
Not really.
Well, I mean, why was she there in the first place?
Oh, I see. Yes.
That guy lost, so...
Diane Abbott has said she will quit the front bench of Labour when a new leader is elected, which doesn't mean to say that she won't be coming back. But she said, whoever becomes leader will have to be able to construct their own shadow cabinet, and she backed Rebecca Long Bailey as her choice for Labour's replacement. I suspect very much that given that Long Bailey wants to see Jeremy Corbyn on the front benches, Diane Abbott has obviously a vested interest in the fact that she was fucking Jeremy Corbyn not too long ago.
Subtle.
As it is. He was passing those pictures around like they were candy to children. So he gets put in her place as the Shadow Home Secretary. And we'll have Shadow Home Secretary Jeremy Corbyn. I think that would be more likely. Again, whilst Keir Starmer is still the frontrunner, I see Rebecca Long Bailey is winning it by a landslide. I don't know about you.
I still think, it sounds at the moment as if Keir Starmer is in the front.
He is, but not necessarily this is only amongst the cabinet ministers themselves, or the shadow cabinet ministers.
You think that once momentum come into play in the vote, it will be Rebecca Long Bailey?
Jeremy Corbyn backs Rebecca Long Bailey. John McDonnell, Jeremy Corbyn's right-hand man, backs Rebecca Long Bailey.
No, I'm familiar with the fact that the reason they've stayed on is so that they can manipulate the outcome of the next election. Yes.
So yes, I think
but I've heard that there have been polls done among Labour membership, and that Keir Starmer apparently is in the lead.
Well, if it happens, it happens. He's as nutty as the rest of them, but I would not be surprised to see
the former director of public prosecutions, Keir Starmer.
Indeed.
The chap who insisted that the gentleman who made a joke about Nottingham Airport be prosecuted.
Yes.
Yes, that's Keir Starmer. I'm a big fan, as you can tell.
People in chat saying, JMC says, putting Keir out front makes it easier to backstab him.
Or push him when he's near the steps.
Oh, indeed. Just before... No, that's... I forgot about something there. We have one more story for this evening, which is something, no doubt, we could stretch to two more. I don't know. Like every time I do this, there's going to be two more. But no, genuinely, we have just two more. So I have this one from the Independent, which says, grooming gang review kept secret as Home Office claims releasing the findings not in the public interest.
You've been watching The Week That Was, haven't you?
I have. Would I stoop so low, British? It's almost as if it was of interest to me because of my. But yes, the government is refusing to release official research on the characteristics of the grooming gangs, claiming it's not in the public interest. And there is an absolutely ridiculous soundbite, effectively, from it, which says, "We recognise that this topic in general, and any insight and learning to be gleaned from it, are matters of strong public interest, although it does not necessarily follow that it is in the public interest to disclose any specific information relating to it." i.e., if we learn anything from it, we'll tell you, plebeians. However, you're not allowed to see it. Don't be ridiculous, because you might be prejudiced by what you read. But as anyone knows, you can get the this is not just the suspects, right? Because the big difference between this and, say, the work of Peter McLaughlin, who's the guy who published the book Easy Meat and who has a website which details a number of statistics relating to grooming gang convictions, is that this will have information in it relating to people currently under the demographic information of people currently under investigation, which will be a damn sight more damning than, say, the conviction rate, which is still under 500 persons, even if it happens to be 92% of a certain ethnic distinction. Yes. Any thoughts that you want to bring via the week that was, Britisher, to the chat?
Well, when it comes to the whole thing, I would sort of say, look, does this involve the military? Does this involve MI5, MI6? Does this in any way involve national security?
No.
So it's paid for by public funds. This was done by the government with our money. Mm-hmm. It's to inform policies and strategies of our police force.
Yeah.
And the people who are now basically deciding that we shouldn't see it are members of our government. And you just go, well, I'm sorry, but no.
That's not the way this works.
We are the electorate. So we are supposed to base our decisions, our judgments on information. This is exactly the sort of information we're supposed to base it on.
Exactly. But Britisher, one of the main purposes of this exemption is to protect the safe space necessary for ministers and officials to consider policy options in private.
Well, yes, but then we will be able to evaluate whether we think they made the right decision.
Exactly. An ongoing policy decision is not a policy decision that has been made. And if they do make a policy decision, then they will just abstract it in some other way. They'll say something,
so
there is an ongoing
why do we really think that it's being withheld?
I think they're scared of the response of the traditional British person when they realise the extent of this inquiry. Judging by my own extrapolations, this means that potentially 20% of the entire Muslim population in Britain could be currently under assessment as a threat, which is approximately 160,000 individuals. Now,
that's a lot of people.
If we only have 88,000 prison spaces, it's a big problem. So if you take that into account, the public outcry at this government, if they find out that actually 1 in 5 of these people is under investigation, if you meet them in the street, the chance of civil unrest is quite worrying enough to them to warrant them.
In that same article, there is also reference to a previous article of The Independent, in which they speak of 19,000 people, well, women, having been identified so far who were victims of grooming.
Yes.
So yeah, the figures are becoming quite shocking here.
Yeah, and not to mention that the more,
these are the ones that have been identified.
Not to mention that the more that this is kept in the dark, the more the conspiracy theorists
it
kind of go to town.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what side of the coin they fall on, whether or not they're white supremacists, whether or not they're regular people who are just literally searching for answers in whatever corner that they can find it. If you don't have clear information, then you're going to be, all you're contributing to is fake news, the misinformation. If you're going to provide it, at least provide it.
No,
we know you have it.
I fully agree.
We know you have it, Britisher. Give it to me.
Well, when it when it comes to the idea that this could be fodder for the far right, and this could be misrepresented and it could be quoted out of context and things like that. I mean, these are the arguments that are being put forward. And you go, well, anything can be quoted out of context. So once you eventually tell us about your policy decisions, they can be quoted out of context. That's meaningless. When it comes to the far right, is there anything more helpful to them than withholding this information? I mean, it's it's just ridiculous. Because in the end, what is needed here more than anything else is truthfulness. Because this whole story is one of...
It's veiled in a mire of government cover-ups, accusations of
I mean, wasn't there Gordon Brown asking councils and police forces not to investigate this because of racism?
The exact thing was find other ethnicities. This is not for you police officers to get yourself involved in. Until 2005, it was all classed as child prostitution. Many of the social services workers might have been customers of these rape gangs themselves. There is so much going on that is unclear, and there is so little information, and it's for two reasons. The first is the cover-up side of it, where people just didn't want it getting out. They were more interested in pumping their numbers and so on in terms of success cases for the policy and the pressure they were getting from higher government. And the other is the complete lack of standardisation that they had back then, when a mixture of LSCBs and ECBCs, which are basically the children's safeguarding boards that were supposed to help these kids, they just didn't talk to anyone. They were hideously run. They were massively mismanaged. They had no standardised section of paperwork. They lied about other organisations that actually had more of an impact because they were jealous of them. So there was professional jealousy was something which characterised two of the constituencies I've been looking to, definitely, because they were just faceless bureaucrats who looked at the kids as a number on a sheet, and they weren't interested in it at the upper levels. And then at the lower levels, the people who were actually good at this sort of stuff were quitting left, right, and centre, leaving only the incompetent and the bastards who were there taking advantage of these kids, because their attitude towards them was so poor. Like, there was so much going on, and there is so little in terms of clear information. It's been an absolute nightmare to go through. But what can you do? At the end of the day, I don't think we'll ever know the true extent of it. Certainly back beyond, really, the mid-90s, which is like 20 years, right? 20 years of information we don't have access to. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw similar figures to what we were seeing last year, 2018 to 2019, actually, with 19,000 new victims reported. And that's estimated to be anywhere between 5% and 15% of the actual amount of victims that were actually out there for that year. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. So some clarity on this is absolutely needed. That's all I'll say. Sorry, rant over there.
Yeah, it's the fact that if you have had a story that basically, the large part of the story consists of the fact that this was basically not, and one part covered up, but covered up is perhaps the wrong word.
Well,
didn't want to see it.
I don't. They
That's
didn't.
Perhaps the better way of putting it.
They didn't want to see it. They were more interested in the fact that these girls had an income, because some of them were being given gifts or whatever by their abusers, alongside the drugs, etc. They were more happy that in these labour councils that the kids had an income than they were worried about where they were disappearing off to. And so they put it out of their minds. And you couple that with the fact that, let's say you live in one of these constituencies, and you know for a fact that someone who's related to you, perhaps your neighbour's daughter or something like that, has been going consistently missing. You know what's been going on and what's happening to her. You've reported it to the police have done nothing. You've reported it to Children's Social Services, they've done nothing. You do this on and off for 5 to 10 years, and you get nothing back. You stop going, and everybody stopped going to the services. And so the services are going, well, we must be doing a good job then.
We've solved all these cases.
Less people are coming to us. But that's not the case, because they were still overworked. There were still too many people who were going to them who were new victims. But all the old victims who got left behind basically either fled or they were lost. They were lost. They were murdered or they were raped until they were nothing less. There was nothing left of them. It's absolutely sickening and unreal. Anyway, so the fact that they're keeping this secret, I find, is absolutely disgusting to me. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know how to get access to it. I don't know what we're going to do, because it's going to be at least 5 years before we can get access to it otherwise. I don't know whether or not that's soon enough. Siskowen says, there seems to be a mysterious noise. I keep hearing the grinding of metal. Oh, never mind. It's on my side.
Fan. I'm not sure. Might be my computer fan is once in a while kicking off.
No, he says, oh, never mind. It's on my side. He's grinding his axes. For sure. The new IKB says, if it comes to civil unrest, what will the army do, given that the working class is the main recruitment group in the army, could go sideways real fast? I don't think we'd have martial law imposed particularly. It would have to be how damning was the evidence. But I think at the very least it would provoke a national response and a demand that more be done. Because at the moment, what is being done is kind of like, oh yes, we'll be running an inquiry here and there, and oh yes, it's very disgusting, and oh yes, Sarah Champion is still going to this committee of like 10 people. But it's not first and foremost on the government's agenda. And I think in the wake of Brexit negotiations, when we need to find something new to kind of capture the public consciousness, if this came out, that's all people would be talking about, because I consider it to be the equivalent of the British Holocaust, and it is on that kind of scale, anywhere between 300,000 and 1 million girls. So even over 40 years, that's unreal kind of damage to the British people, and something needs to be done about it, definitely. Anyway. Anything else?
This is really an welcome to the upbeat, fun edition of
what should I say?
Fake Accents Unite, ladies and gentlemen.
Light current affairs programming at its finest. I have one more on a similar vibe. I'm going to put this image on to this document. Put this image. Save it properly, would you? I hate it when Twitter decides it's going to save as a JFIF for no adequately explored reason. Just going to put this up. This is the Nike commercial that's come out. Have you seen this, Richard?
No, I am not familiar with a recent Nike commercial, so you will be educating me here.
I will definitely be educating you here. Let me just pop this up. Settings. And image, quick access. There we go. Right, so let me pop that up for you to see, and I will link you on in the stream chat. Can you see this?
I can see that, yes.
Don't change who you are. Change the world. Just do it. And it's got a picture of a football team, or in fact, it's several sports. And
these are various sports, yes. And,
all dressed in a hijab.
They all seem overdressed.
They all seem terribly overdressed for sporting activity. I can't. And it's just such a bizarre line to take with it. Don't change who you are, change the world. I think I responded to it by saying, oh, don't change who you are. Don't grow as a person. Don't adjust to others. Don't be considerate. Don't be tolerant. Conquer your enemies. Conquer the nations. Colonize your detractors. Seize your moral superiority and impose it on the world. I can't see anything out of it, especially using the symbol of an oppression. I mean, really. What's your take on this, British? Like, give me a fence post here.
Well, the fence post, I don't know. I see this as let's face it. Why is one doing this? One is doing this for two reasons. That A, this is the usual virtue signal. But at the same time, this would be an area in which one hopes to achieve growth. So basically, these are countries in which one maybe be able to sell some more sneakers.
You realise this is aimed at our country.
Oh yes, but you also realise that this will then be seen elsewhere, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So the virtue signal is to our countries, and the how shall we say, market preparation is to the others.
But that one there on the right is showing her knees, Britisher.
Oh, slut. No, I am highly skeptical whenever it comes to these values that companies purport to have. Companies don't have values.
No.
The only thing companies are there for, in fact, what companies are required to seek by law, if they are owned by shareholders, is to seek profit.
Yeah.
So this idea of, oh well, you see, we feel the way you do. No, companies don't feel. No, they may be hijacked. They may be hijacked at times, but as such, no, that they are not there to emote. They are there to make money.
Note, though, that there will be some marketing manager who says this is the way to engage with people, to show our commitment to diversity, etc., etc., etc. That marketing director will likely be fired as a result of this if it goes south, if they get a boycott, if they get a fall in the stock, right? And they will be replaced by another marketing manager with exactly the same cookie-cutter values, with exactly the same SJW education, with exactly the same opinions, and there is no way that they can get out of it. And they'll just go, well, they've got a marketing degree, they must know what the people want.
Always consider, of course, that Nike is obviously, with this kind of a sales campaign, in for massive increases in sale in Scotland.
Yes, clearly at this point. And of course, we should all take our moral lessons from a company we know which operates sweatshops in the Far East. Dear. Pyrrhus of Epirus says, I don't understand why you don't just eliminate the criminal when they assault your daughters. People tried. After going to the police and failing, many of the fathers basically, usually when they were drunk and feeling a little bit more boisterous, they were sick to death of being sent things like home pornography of their daughters being raped. They would go to their houses and they would, sometimes they would tell the police, they'd say, if you're not going to do something, I'm going to do something, immediately on a watch list. And if they then go within 3 feet of the house where they know their daughter is being kept, they are then arrested, usually on a drunken disorderly, or a causing public disturbance, or a property damage charge if they've lobbed a brick or something like that. And they know that they're there and they lie in wait, and it's a real tragedy. Some of these men get within feet of their daughter and they can't do it, and then the daughter is trafficked somewhere potentially hundreds of miles away so that they know that they're not going to be attacked again. Really, it's heartbreaking. But the police have been absolutely complicit in this stuff. And on that note, I think it is relatively time to end. I know we've only been running for a couple of hours, but unfortunately, busy week ahead. I will hope to see you all for Trusty Streams at the weekend. I'll also hopefully try and produce the video later this week, but we'll see how it goes. I still have the audio recorded for the attachment theory video, so I've got to work on that. Anything that you've got in the works, Britisher, that you want to plug whilst you're here?
Not at the moment. I've got something in the works, but we will still need to see how long it will actually take to make.
No problem. Britisher is frequenting the works, those of you who know that venerable British bookshop. Good to know. And I will see you all next time. Thank you very much to everybody, and have a great week. Ta.
Toodle pip.